My name is Jewel Gleason. I'm 36 years old, and if you'd told me a few years ago that love could bankrupt not just your wallet but your soul, I would have laughed. Back then, I believed in partnership, in teamwork, in us against the world. Now I know better. Sometimes the person standing beside you isn't fighting with you, they're holding the door open for the enemy. I built everything I have with my own hands, and I don't mean that figuratively. I started with a rundown duplex on the outskirts of Dallas, a cracked driveway, and a loan officer who told me I was too young and too female to handle real estate. 10 years, 6 flips, and a lot of sleepless nights later, I owned my own real estate firm, Gleason Properties, and a quiet kind of pride that didn't need validation. Then I met Lucas. He wasn't flashy like most of the men I dated. He was gentle, steady, the kind of man who asked how your day was and actually listened. He worked in architecture, which I thought was poetic. I built houses, he designed them. It felt right. When he introduced me to his parents, I should have noticed the signs. Carmen Alvarez, that was her name. His mother. The kind of woman who didn't just walk into a room, she occupied it. Every word had weight, every glance an unspoken judgment. The first time we met, she smiled politely and said, "So you're the one who finally distracted my son from work." I laughed, not catching the edge in her tone until much later. Her husband Federico was quieter. Kind eyes. A man who spoke only when it was absolutely necessary, the kind of silence that comes from decades of surviving someone louder. At first, Carmen pretended to like me. She'd compliment my shoes while criticizing my independence in the same breath. "You must be exhausted, dear. Handling business all by yourself, no wonder you haven't settled down sooner." Lucas would laugh it off. That's just mom being mom. I'd smile too, but deep down I knew something was off. When Lucas proposed, Carmen's reaction wasn't tears of joy. It was strategy. Within days, she'd inserted herself into every wedding decision. Venue colors, guest list, everything. If I said I liked lilies, she'd suggest roses. If I wanted something simple, she'd say, "Simple is fine for people without taste." I should have stopped it then, drawn a line. But love makes you soft, and Lucas's pleading eyes made me softer. "It's just one day, Jewel. Let her feel included." So I caved. And in caving, I taught Carmen the most dangerous lesson that I could be bent. The wedding was beautiful, on the surface. But when I look back at the photos now, all I see is Carmen standing just behind us like a queen blessing her subjects. Even then, she was claiming her territory. After the honeymoon, Lucas and I finally had peace, or so I thought, until one night during dinner his phone buzzed. He looked at it and said a little too casually, "Mom called. She wants to talk to us about something important." I laughed. "She's not pregnant, is she?" He didn't laugh back. The something important turned out to be the Alvarez family home, a 2-story aging house in Austin that Carmen and Federico had lived in for over 30 years. Carmen sat across from us, her expression soft, rehearsed. "We've decided to sell the house," she said. "But it breaks my heart to think of strangers living there. It should stay in the family." Lucas immediately turned to me. "Maybe we could buy it." I almost spit out my coffee. "Buy your parents' house." Carmen nodded solemnly. "Think of it as preserving our legacy. This home raised my children. It has good bones, it just needs love." Good bones. The place was practically a skeleton. I'd seen the photos peeling paint-sagging porch roof like Swiss cheese. "It needs a miracle," I said flatly. But Carmen was relentless. "You're in real estate, Jewel. You can see potential others can't." It wasn't flattery, it was bait. That night, Lucas couldn't stop talking about it. "It's sentimental to her," he said. "She just wants to keep it in the family." Lucas. I sighed. "She's selling you nostalgia at market price. It's not that bad. We'd get a deal." So I ran the numbers the way I always do, and the math didn't lie. The renovation would cost at least $150,000 on top of Carmen's asking price of $450,000. We'd be sinking more into that house than it would ever be worth. "This isn't an investment," I told him. "It's financial suicide." He fell quiet, but I could tell he was torn not between logic and emotion, but between me and his mother. 2 days later, Carmen called again. This time she was crying. "Jewel, please. I know it's not ideal, but I can't bear the thought of losing the home where Lucas took his first steps. I just wanted to stay with family." Her voice cracked at all the right places, and for a second I almost believed her. Love does that to you. It dulls your instincts. You tell yourself you're being compassionate when in reality you're being cornered. So I said the words I'd regret later. "Fine, we'll buy it." And Carmen, ever gracious, replied softly, "You're doing the right thing, mija. This house has always taken care of our family. It knows who belongs in it. As she hugged me, her perfume, that thick, cloying rose scent, clung to my skin. Even after she left, I could still smell it. That night, as Lucas and I signed the first set of papers, I stared at our names on the contract and whispered to myself, "Some houses don't want to be bought. They want to own you." But it was already too late. The first time I stepped into the Alvarez house, I felt it, that strange stillness that doesn't belong to an empty building, but to something that's been watching. The air smelled like dust and rosewater. The wooden floors groaned under each step, as if they were whispering their disapproval. I told myself it was just old wood, but deep down I knew better. Carmen had called it home. To me, it felt like an inheritance of secrets. Lucas was thrilled, though. He stood in the middle of the crumbling living room, eyes shining. "Imagine it, Jewel, we could turn this into something beautiful." I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But when your hands have rebuilt as many houses as mine, you stop imagining, you calculate, and the numbers didn't add up. Every wall we opened revealed a new disaster: termite trails, leaking pipes, a foundation that moaned like it wanted to collapse. My contractor looked at me with pity when I asked for the timeline. 6 months if you don't sleep, he said. Lucas shrugged. We'll get through it together. But together quickly became me doing most of the work while he ran interference with his mother. Because Carmen never really left. At first, she'd drop by under the pretense of helping. She'd bring coffee and pastries, her smile sweet enough to rot teeth. "You should keep the kitchen cabinets," she'd say. "They're original." Original. They were rotting. I wanted to rip them out, but Lucas hesitated. "She means well, Jewel. It's sentimental for her." Sentimental became her favorite weapon. Every rusted hinge, every faded wallpaper, all part of the family's story. I started feeling like I was renovating someone else's memories, not building my own life. The visits multiplied. Sometimes she'd show up with bags of decor magazines, sometimes with family photos to inspire how we should decorate. One afternoon, she arrived unannounced again, arms full of old picture frames and a triumphant grin. "These will look perfect in the hallway," she said, brushing past me like she owned the place. I tried to be polite. "Carmen, I appreciate the thought, but Lucas and I have our own plans." She froze, her expression tightening. "I'm only trying to help. You don't have to bite my head off." And just like that, she was the victim, I was the villain. It became her favorite play. The next few weeks blurred into stress plaster dust and subtle warfare. Every time I thought we'd set a boundary, Carmen found a new way to cross it. Once she called a plumber herself, just to help, and had him replace fixtures I'd already chosen. Another time I came home to find new curtains. Pale beige floral, her taste, not mine. "Did you buy these?" I asked Lucas. "No. Why?" "Because they weren't here this morning." He shrugged, distracted. "Maybe you forgot." But I didn't forget. That was the first time the doubt crept in, the kind that crawls up your spine and whispers, "You're not crazy. You're being watched." A few days later, I noticed something worse. Small things missing. My favorite coffee mug gone. A set of earrings that used to sit on my dresser vanished. A scarf I'd left on the banister nowhere. When I asked Lucas, he frowned. "You probably misplaced them." "I don't misplace things," I snapped. The argument that followed wasn't really about a mug or a scarf. It was about control, who had it and who was slowly losing it. And I was losing. One afternoon, after Lucas left for work, I came home early to grab a forgotten folder. When I stepped inside, I froze. The couch was at a different angle. The rug had been flipped. And the faint smell of Carmen's perfume, that syrupy rose scent, hung in the air like a ghost. My heart pounded. I checked the locks. All secure. The windows were shut. Still, that smell lingered. I whispered to the empty room. "Carmen." Nothing, just silence. But then the house creaked, a long, deliberate groan as if answering. That night I confronted Lucas. "Your mother's been here." "What?" "No, she hasn't." Her perfume was all over the living room. The couch was moved. "Jewel, come on. You're exhausted. You've been working too hard." I stared at him, disbelief turning into cold anger. "You think I imagined it? I think you need rest." The way he said it, patient, patronizing, made my skin crawl. That's when I realized Carmen didn't need to break in through doors. She was already inside our walls through Lucas. A few days later, she called again. "Jewel, dear, I dropped off a few things while you were out. I hope you don't mind." My throat went dry. "Dropped off just a few old photo albums. I thought you'd like to see the house when it was still ours." "Ours, not yours." She said it so naturally, like the papers we'd signed meant nothing. That night, as I looked through the dusty photo albums she'd left, something in me shifted. Every picture showed Carmen in front of the same house, smiling, proud, possessive, while her husband and son stood beside her like furniture. In that moment, I understood. The house wasn't a gift. It was a leash, and Carmen had every intention of keeping it tight around our necks. The night after the photo album incident, I barely slept. Every creak sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a whisper through the vents. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia doesn't rearrange furniture. So the next morning, I took control the only way I knew how. I installed cameras. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one by the back door, hidden discreet. I didn't tell Lucas, because deep down I needed to know who I was really fighting, his mother or my imagination. For a few days, everything seemed normal, too normal. No moved pillows, no missing items. Carmen didn't call. Lucas seemed lighter, humming while he made coffee, as if the storm had finally passed. But storms don't pass, they pause. On the 5th day, I got the notification. Motion detected, 2:17 p.m. I was at work. Lucas was supposed to be at the firm. When I opened the live feed, my stomach turned to ice. Carmen, waltzing into my house like she'd just come home from church, a key glinting in her hand. She didn't knock, she didn't call, she owned her entrance. For 10 minutes, I watched her move through the rooms, humming softly to herself. She opened drawers, lifted cushions, dusted a photo frame like she was caring for a relic. Then she reached for one of the albums she'd brought, flipped through the pages, and said under her breath, "You still look good in this house, mijo." My husband, her son. It wasn't just intrusion, it was worship. When I confronted Lucas that night, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just handed him my phone and pressed play. He watched the footage, his face blank. Then slowly he said, "She probably just missed the house." I blinked. "Missed the house, Lucas," she broke in. She went through our drawers. "She has a key, Jewel. She didn't break anything." The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. "Why does she have a key?" I demanded. He hesitated. I gave it to her, just in case of emergencies. That was it. The truth. The invisible line drawn behind my back. You don't trust me to handle an emergency, but you trust her to wander through our lives. You're overreacting, he said softly, the way people speak to children or crazy people. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "No, Lucas, I'm finally reacting." The next morning I changed the locks. By noon, Carmen called. Her voice was shaking, theatric. "Jewel, why would you do something so cruel? You've humiliated me. You entered our home without permission. Our home. That house raised my son. It's part of our family." I could hear the tears starting, the well-practiced ones. "You're tearing us apart," she sobbed. "You're making him choose." And there it was, the real motive naked in her words. "He already chose when he married me," I said quietly. "You just can't accept it." She hung up. That night, Lucas came home silent. No hello, no kiss, just a tension that filled the room. Finally, he said, "Mom's upset. She feels like you're shutting her out." "I'm protecting my boundaries," I replied. "Boundaries shouldn't make people feel unloved." I laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds too close to breaking. "No, Lucas. Boundaries make you feel unloved because she's conditioned you to believe that love means access." He turned away, jaw tight. "You don't understand her." "No," I said, "I understand her too well." The next few days were a blur of small retaliations. Lucas started sleeping in the guest room for space. Carmen began her campaign, calling him 3-4 times a day, crying on cue. Neighbors I'd never met started looking at me strangely. One morning I found a letter in the mailbox, unsigned, written in perfect cursive. "A good wife keeps families together, not apart." My hands shook as I crumpled it. Carmen's perfume was faint on the paper. I stopped answering the door. I kept the cameras running. Then one afternoon, another notification, motion detected. 11:42 a.m. Carmen again. But this time she wasn't alone. Federico followed behind her, silent, tired. "You shouldn't be here," he said in the footage. "It's my house," Carmen snapped. "I can be anywhere I want." She wandered into the kitchen, opened a drawer, and took something out, my spare house keys. Then she looked straight at the camera, right into the lens, and smiled. That night I packed a small suitcase. Not to leave, not yet. But because I knew the war had started. Carmen wasn't just meddling, she was marking territory. And Lucas, the man I'd built a life with, was holding the other end of her leash. As I zipped the bag, I whispered to the dark hallway, "You wanted control, Carmen. Let's see how it feels when you lose it." I didn't expect the call from Federico. He was the last person I thought would reach out, the quiet man who always stood behind Carmen like a shadow that had forgotten it once belonged to light. He spoke softly, like he was afraid she might still hear him from miles away. "Jewel, can we meet, just the two of us? There's something you need to know." His voice trembled, not with fear, with guilt. We met at a small diner off Interstate 35, the kind of place where the neon flickers even at noon, and the waitress knows everyone's secrets but doesn't repeat them. Federico was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a half-finished cup of black coffee. He looked smaller without Carmen beside him, like a man who'd been folded in half by decades of compromise. When he saw me, he stood up quickly too politely, then sat back down like he wasn't sure what gesture was safe anymore. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am," I replied. "Your wife's made sure of it." He winced, then leaned forward. "Carmen's not well, Jewel. But that doesn't excuse what she's done. You need to understand she's been planning this for months." My heart stuttered. "Planning what?" He took a deep breath, rubbed his temples, and whispered, "The house. Selling it to you wasn't an accident, it was part of her plan." For a second, the world around me went silent. No clinking cups, no chatter, just the thudding of my own pulse. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "Why would she—" "Because she wants control," he interrupted. "Over Lucas, over you, over everything." He looked away ashamed. "She convinced him it was a good investment, said it'd bring the family closer. But what she really wanted was to tie you down, drain your money, make you resent him, and then—" He swallowed hard. "Then she planned to buy it back once you couldn't afford it. Claim it as her sacrifice to save the family home. Then she'd convince Lucas to move in with us again. Her house, her rules, her victory." I stared at him, my mind racing back through every word, every tear, "You're doing the right thing," she'd said. It had never been nostalgia. It had been a trap. "Does Lucas know?" I asked quietly. Federico shook his head. "Not the full story. She tells him what he can handle. She always has." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, $20,000. "It's not enough," he said, his voice breaking. "But it's something. Consider it repayment for the trouble she's caused. If you sell the house back to me quietly, I'll give you the rest later. She doesn't have to know." I looked at the check, then at him. The paper trembled in my hand, not from greed, but fury. "You think money fixes this?" I whispered. "No," he said softly, "but maybe silence will." The hum of the neon sign buzzed above us. The light flickered red, white, red, painting his face in guilt. I pushed the envelope back across the table. "I don't want your money, Federico. I want my life back." He looked at me like I'd just signed my own death warrant. "She'll come for you," he said. "Let her," I replied. "At least now I'll see her coming." When I left the diner, the Texas heat hit me like a wave. In the reflection of my car window, I saw myself exhausted, furious, but finally awake. Carmen hadn't just manipulated her son. She'd built a system around control, guilt, nostalgia money, and I had walked straight into it holding a set of keys she'd let me have. That night, I sat across from Lucas at the dinner table, my phone between us. I told him everything: Federico's confession, the check, the plan. He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. "You met my father without telling me." He reached out. He told me the truth. "No," he said, his voice low and shaking. "He told you what you wanted to hear. My mom would never—" I laughed, bitter sharp. "Lucas, she's been breaking into our home. I have footage. She's been manipulating you, your father." "Stop," he snapped. "You don't get to talk about her like that. She's my mother." "And I'm your wife," I fired back. "Or does that only count when she approves?" His silence was worse than shouting. He looked at me, eyes full of disappointment, not because of what his mother had done, but because I dared to expose it. Later that night, I found him sitting outside on the porch, cigarette in hand. He didn't smoke before all this. The ember glowed like a tiny dying sun. "You're obsessed with demonizing her," he said quietly. "I'm trying to protect us. She's trying to help." That was it, the final line, the quietest betrayal I'd ever heard. "Then maybe you should go let her help you," I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon, at nothing. Inside the house seemed to sigh. The lights flickered once, like the walls themselves had heard us break. As I lay in bed alone, I replayed Federico's final words. "She'll come for you." And I realized he wasn't warning me. He was preparing me. I woke up to the sound of silence, that hollow kind that feels like the world is holding its breath before something snaps. Lucas's side of the bed was empty. The faint smell of his cologne lingered mixed with that ever-present trace of Carmen's perfume, as if the house itself couldn't decide who it belonged to anymore. When I went downstairs, the coffee was already brewed. 2 mugs sat on the counter, one half full, one untouched. A note beside them written in Lucas's hurried handwriting. "Staying with Mom for a few days. We both need space." I didn't cry. Not then. Tears would have felt like permission for her to win. Instead, I grabbed my keys and went to the hardware store. I changed every lock in that house again. Front door, back door, even the gate. And this time, I didn't tell anyone. When I was done, I stood outside, sweaty and shaking, and whispered to myself, "You wanted control, Carmen. Let's see how you like being locked out." The next day, she came. The doorbell rang at noon, long and deliberate. I peeked through the blinds. There she was. Perfectly dressed pearls glinting, clutching her purse like it contained scripture. When I didn't open, she started knocking, then pounding. "Jewel, open this door. I know you're in there." Her voice cracked first from anger, then from tears. "You can't keep me out of my home." I said nothing. Every hit on the door felt like a heartbeat. When she finally left, the silence that followed was worse than the noise. That night, Lucas called. "You changed the locks again." "Yes." "She's distraught, Jewel. You're being cruel. I'm being safe. She said you threatened to call the cops." "I did. I wasn't bluffing." He was quiet for a moment, then said, almost pleading, "Can't you just try to get along with her?" I closed my eyes, tired down to my bones. "Lucas, she broke into our home, manipulated us into buying her debt, and made me feel like a stranger in my own life. I'm done trying." Then maybe he said coldly, "You're done with me too." The line went dead. A week later, I came home from work to find the police in my driveway. 2 officers, calm but firm. One of them held a clipboard. "Mrs. Gleason." "Yes, we received a complaint from Mrs. Carmen Alvarez. She claims you're destroying property that still belongs to her." I laughed, sharp, exhausted. "Does she also claim she owns the moon?" They smiled politely but asked to see the deed. I showed it to them. My name, my signature, my mortgage. It was over in minutes. Before they left, one officer muttered, "Happens more than you'd think. Family's the worst kind of enemy." He wasn't wrong. That night, Lucas came by. He didn't knock, just stood in the doorway looking hollow. "You called the police on her." "She called them on me. She was crying for hours. Maybe she should have saved some tears for the truth." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. "I don't know who you've become." "Stronger," I said. Finally. The fight that followed was quiet, cruel, and final. Words thrown like knives, old love buried under new bitterness. When I said the words me or her, they didn't even echo. He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, jaw tight, like a little boy who didn't want to choose between parents. So I made the choice for him. "Pack your things." He didn't argue, didn't even look at me when he left. As the door clicked shut, the house seemed to exhale long and low, like it had been waiting for this moment too. The next few weeks passed in fragments. Papers filed, calls to lawyers, empty rooms. I started sleeping in the guest bedroom because the master still smelled like him and her. But something strange happened. The house began to feel lighter, like it was purging its ghosts one by one, until one night I came home and found the front gate open. The locks weren't broken, just undone. The porch light flickered, and there, lying neatly on the doormat, was an envelope. Inside, photos. Old wedding pictures, family portraits, and a note written in Carmen's perfect script. "You can change the locks, Jewel, but you'll never erase me from this house." I burned the photos that night, every single one. Watched their faces curl and blacken under the flame. For the first time in months, I felt nothing. No fear, no rage, just a clean, cold kind of peace. That's when I knew I was done being haunted. Carmen had built her kingdom on guilt and control. Lucas had chosen to kneel at her feet. Let them have each other. I was finally free, or so I thought. Freedom didn't feel like I imagined it would. It wasn't peace. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that made you check the shadows twice before turning off the lights. I'd filed for separation, locked every door, and even listed the house for rent. I thought that would be the end of it. But Carmen wasn't the kind of woman who lost gracefully. A young couple moved in within weeks, sweet people newlyweds. When they came to sign the lease, I warned them gently. The neighbors can be intrusive. They laughed, thinking I was joking. For a while, everything went smoothly. Until one afternoon, the wife called me, voice trembling. "Mrs. Gleason, there's a woman outside. She says she's the owner." "What does she look like?" "Older pearls, really well dressed. She keeps saying something about her family's house." She tried to open the gate. My heart dropped. "Don't let her in," I said sharply. "Call the police if she refuses to leave." The tenant hesitated. "She's crying now. She said you're keeping her out of her own home." Of course she was crying. That was Carmen's greatest weapon. When I got there, she was gone. But her perfume lingered, roses and rot, drifting across the porch, like smoke after a small fire. The tenants were shaken, but safe. I promised it wouldn't happen again, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. That night, I called Carmen. She answered on the first ring. "Jewel," she said sweetly, as if we were old friends. "What were you doing at my house?" "Our house," she corrected. "You're desecrating it. renting it out to strangers. This place has history, my history. You sold it. It's mine now. It will never be yours." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You can build your walls, lock your doors, change your name if you want. You'll still be standing inside my memories." And then she hung up. A few days later, a courier arrived, an envelope, legal papers. Carmen was suing me. Her claim that I had violated the spirit of sale by desecrating a family property and profiting from ancestral heritage. I actually laughed out loud. Then I called my lawyer. He sighed the moment he read it. "She has no legal standing. It's pure spite, but we'll have to show up." Court felt surreal. Carmen arrived in a white suit, pearls shining like armor, Lucas trailing behind her thinner, now eyes hollow. He didn't look at me once. When the judge read her complaint aloud, even he sounded annoyed. "Mrs. Alvarez, do you have any documentation of this so-called ancestral clause?" "It's unspoken," she said firmly. "It's family honor. This court deals in law, not emotion." She glared at me, then eyes burning with the fury of someone who had built her entire life around control and was watching it slip through her fingers. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. When the gavel came down, it was over. Case dismissed. The judge even ordered her to pay my legal fees. As we left the courtroom, Carmen brushed past me, whispering through gritted teeth, "You think you've won. You'll see what happens when family turns on family." I turned to her calm. "You already showed me." Her face cracked, the first visible fracture in her porcelain armor. And then, for the first time since I'd known her, she had no words. Outside, the sun hit my face. It felt like warmth, for the first time in months, not interrogation. I took a deep breath. Freedom didn't come with trumpets. It came with paperwork and silence. But it was mine. Weeks passed. The tenants were happy. The rent came in on time. Carmen stayed quiet, which somehow scared me more than her screaming ever did. Then one evening my phone buzzed. Lucas. I hesitated before answering. His voice was soft, shaky. "Jewel, can we talk?" We met at a small park near the courthouse. He looked older, defeated. His hair had thinned. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, "for everything. You were right about her, about the house, about all of it." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "She's unbearable now, controlling every move I make. I can't breathe in that house." I studied him, the man who once made me believe in partnership. Now he was just another one of her victims. "You could have left," I said quietly. "I thought she'd change. She won't." "I know," he whispered. "That's why I wanted to see you, to say sorry." Tears welled in his eyes. It should have made me soften, but all I felt was a dull ache, like pressing on an old scar. "I forgive you," I said, "but that doesn't mean I want you back." He nodded, a faint broken smile. I figured. When I walked away that night, the city lights blurred into streaks, red, gold, soft, white. And for the first time, I didn't feel watched, didn't feel followed, didn't feel haunted. Carmen had lost, but more than that, she'd lost control. And I had finally learned that the cost of peace isn't forgiveness, it's distance. 6 months later, I drove back to Austin, not to visit anyone, not to reclaim anything, just to see. I told myself it was curiosity, the kind that lingers even after you've moved on. But deep down, I knew it was something darker. Closure isn't peace, it's confrontation dressed as calm. The GPS led me through familiar streets until the house appeared, the Alvarez house, though no one called it that anymore. Fresh paint, new roof, a bright blue mailbox where the rusted one used to hang crooked. It didn't look haunted now. It looked alive. Someone else's laughter spilled through the open windows, children's laughter. There were toys scattered on the porch, and a wind chime tinkling softly in the afternoon breeze. For a moment, I just sat there in my car, watching the sunlight move across the yard that had once held so many arguments, tears, and whispered manipulations. I wanted to feel relief, but what I felt was something stranger, gratitude mixed with grief, because that house had nearly broken me, and somehow I had survived it. As I started the car, something made me glance up, to the second-floor window, the one that used to be our bedroom, and for just a heartbeat I saw her. A figure standing behind the curtain, poised, still unmistakable. Carmen. The same pearls, the same shadowed profile. I blinked. The curtain shifted. Gone. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe memory playing its cruel little games again. Or maybe some houses keep their ghosts even after you evict them. I didn't get out. Didn't take a photo. Didn't go closer. Instead, I whispered through the glass, "You can have it now. I've already left." Then I drove away. That night, back in Dallas, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The city below pulsed with quiet life, cars, lights, people moving forward. And for the first time, I realized I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology. I just wanted silence that belonged to me. The kind that doesn't come from fear, but from freedom. People sometimes ask me now, clients, friends, people who've heard the rumors, "Do you still own that house?" And I smile just a little. No, I say, it owns itself now. Because some houses aren't meant to be tamed. Some families aren't meant to be fixed. And some love stories, the kind built on guilt and control, aren't love stories at all. They're cautionary tales disguised as devotion. As I turned off the balcony light and looked up at the night sky, I thought of Carmen one last time, her voice, her perfume, her endless need to be remembered. And I finally understood, some ghosts aren't dead people. They're the living ones who refuse to leave your story. I took a deep breath, finished my wine, and let the night swallow the last of her name.